right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Right up now, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Now.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Right About Now podcast. This is John Small. On today's podcast, I am going to play a conversation that I had over on Substack, on something called Substack Live. It was a live and in stereo conversation that I had, my first ever on Substack, and you can find it on my Small Talk Substack. And it was about what my guest calls unretirement. The fact that so many of us who are in our 50s or late 40s are looking at sort of the midway point of our lives and realizing what we thought might be sort of winding down towards the end here as far as work goes is nowhere near that point. I mean, this was supposed to be the part of our lives where things kind of just started, to get a little more fun, to get a little easier, right? But that is not exactly happening. In fact, I would pretty much describe the experience of the Gen Xer as, in the words of Kate Bush, running up that hill. And I have talked about this in past episodes, and I have talked about how we are very resilient and we can handle pretty much everything that is thrown at us. But that doesn't mean it doesn't suck. And it doesn't mean that we don't need a little guidance and a little encouragement. So I wanted to talk to somebody I trusted about this topic, and I found just the person in Brian Clark. And Brian Clark is the writer of Further, which is a newsletter for people who want to sort of redefine what life in their 50s and after 50 really looks like. And Brian has always been ahead of the curve on these kinds of things. He's a former lawyer turned online entrepreneur, and he helped pioneer the content marketing movement before that was even a thing. And now he's helping Gen Xers build flexible, more purpose-driven lives that are not so reliant on a 9-to-5 or a mythical retirement fund that is never coming our way. So in this conversation, we talk about what he calls unretirement, the new retirement, and what that really means. We talk about what members of Gen X can do right now to prepare for a more independent and interesting next chapter. We talk about a subject that is very near and dear to my heart, which is creating different income streams for yourself. We talk about why losing a job might be the best thing to ever happen to you. We talk about AI, remote work, and where people are living if they want to spend their later years outside of the U.S. So whether you've been laid off or you're just clinging on to a job, worrying every day that you're going to lose it, or you just want to plan a little bit more for your future, I think this conversation will be the reset you just might need. Now, a little disclaimer. This was my first Substack Live, and I didn't realize that I could record it through my fancy microphone. Subsequent Substacks will be recorded on my fancy microphone, but this one I'm recording right onto my phone, so it sounds a little bit tinny, not quite the quality that I'm used to sharing with you guys, but hopefully you'll forgive me this one time, because I still really wanted to share this conversation with you because I think you might find it as valuable as I did. So without further ado, I bring you Brian Clark. Brian, it's super exciting to have you with me. Thank you for joining.
This is amazing.
Like, people are joining.
I know.
So, true confession, this is our first ever Substack Live for both of us. So we apologize in advance to Gen Xers trying to do a Substack Live. What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
That's the fun. I mean, right there, the potential chaos is what makes this awesome.
Exactly. More of us should try to walk to the edge of the precipice and see where it brings us. Anyway, Brian, as people join us here, I would love if you could just give us a little bit of your backstory. If people are not familiar with your work, they should be. And that's why one of the reasons I reached out to you immediately is that you have great material on Substack and on your website. But tell us a little bit of backstory, like what you were doing before, what you're doing now. if you give us a little snapshot so people get some context here.
Yeah, let me give you the Cliff Notes version because it's been a while. So I was an attorney way back in the 90s. I was not happy with that. Wanted to actually write was my aspiration in life, which a lot of frustrated lawyers share that same affliction. But my idea was, instead of, New York publishing or LA screenplays, I was going to write on the internet. In 1998, that sounded kind of insane, especially when you have to call up your mom and tell her you're quitting your job. But yeah, ironically, I got started in 98 with my first business, the only one that ever failed, and it was publishing email newsletters. So that shows you how enduring the kids who think Substack's a new thing. Email's been with us since the beginning. Anyway, I had no idea what I was doing. I had never taken a business class, never read a marketing book. But I figured it out, and I figured it out all within the context of the internet, not from traditional marketing. And going forward, I started several successful service businesses. I figured out how to do marketing, and it was always about content. If you gave away content, people would follow you by email, and they would buy things from you. So eventually, 7 years later, I started a website called Copy Blogger that explained what I did with those businesses to succeed with content. A couple of years later, that became known as content marketing. It's now a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Content marketing, right? So you were definitely an early adopter.
And I basically, took that blog and turned it into an 8-figure software company, which got sold off in a couple transactions, something like 12 years later. And then after that, kind of starts the modern era, the further era, when my wife and I decided that we wanted to travel when our kids were out of the house. And this is all kind of part of that narrative.
Yeah. So you are helping people with further, and you can certainly help me rephrase this, but helping people understand what their options are kind of in real time as you're doing it in their 50s, people who are not quite ready to retire or maybe are not in a position to retire, but are looking for ways to kind of enjoy this now new stage of their lives. Hey everybody, it's John here. I want to share some news about our sponsor, AG1. They have upgraded their formula. That's right, after years of development and millions invested in research, the new AG1 Next Gen will include 5 clinically studied probiotic strains, an enhanced methylated B complex, and new and increased vitamins and minerals. Look, I put AG1 powder in my smoothie every single day. AG1 is truly my go-to source for vitamins and gut health. And AG1 is now offering new subscribers to the pod a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free of the aforementioned travel packs in your first box. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/rightaboutnow, WRITE. That's drinkag1.com/rightaboutnow. Get healthy about now. This is what you call the unretirement era, right? To explain to us what that means, like how you sort of view this period of time.
Yeah. So back in 2018, which was when I sold the company, I kind of pulled my kids out of school with my wife and I, and we traveled the world together. And we started off in the fall of 2018 in France, and we were there for 3 months. And while I was there, I read a book called The Longevity Economy that talked about how we're shifting to an older population, how people are living longer, healthier lives. And one of the consequences of this for our particular generation being the first 401k generation and we don't really have pensions is that we don't have the money to retire at a traditional time. But that's okay because we're probably going to want and need to work longer anyway. And that retirement's not all it's cracked up to be. Basically, you sit around worrying you're going to run out of money watching television. I mean, sadly, it's that's the common experience. And so, more and more momentum, you started seeing this media narrative about the Gen X retirement crisis. I mean, we really don't, in the aggregate, have anywhere near enough money to retire, much less for 30 years, which is what you're looking at.
Great.
So this all kind of, is percolating in my brain. I'm like, this is a big problem, but it's not necessarily the problem that people think it is, that we've been kind of conditioned that you get to 65 or 67 now is the Social Security age for us, and that you're just supposed to hang it up. And I'm just saying, I have no desire to retire now or then. And that was really the catalyst. People were like, oh, you sold the company, you're going to retire. I'm like, no, what? I will end up in jail if I have nothing to do. I need, I need a productive time. But yeah, that was kind of the genesis of the whole thing. And then it just kind of snowballed, and I combined it with the trend for people to retire overseas because the cost of living is just unsustainable in the United States. So you put that all together, and I'm like, well, if you start your own business, which I help people do, and it's location independent, then you could live anywhere, and it's way better than retirement. You keep working, you keep your sense of purpose and meaning. You live somewhere great that is less expensive. And that's how it all kind of came together. So Further started off as an email newsletter where I just kind of shared my own insights into the stuff I was working on with myself from a personal development standpoint. Then I realized most of my stuff was unique to midlife. So it shifted to midlife and Gen X. And then it shifted specifically to the retirement issue because everyone kept telling me, hey, it's great. I love all the health information that you share and healthy aging and all that. But the economic issues are what are killing me. And that's basically how we arrived at the present version of what Further is.
Well, I mean, I think for most people watching, listening, this all sounds like amazing. Like we all have this, I think we all agree, like nobody wants to, I know, I'll speak for myself. I do not want to watch television, nor can I afford to watch television and retire at the ripe age in my mid 50s here. But I also don't want to, I don't know if I don't want to work as hard, but I don't want to have to, stress so much about work all the time. And just that, that was for me in my 20s and 30s. That's fine. And maybe even some of my 40s. But when the kids are out of college, when I have some time, I want to feel like, yes, I'm working and I'm being productive, but I'm doing stuff I want to do, and I'm being able to, and I'm not worrying so much about money, but I'm also just not a part of the rat race. I think that's where a lot of people are at now. And what steps can we take to get there? I mean, some of your advice is almost counterintuitive. You're sort of saying leave that corporate job, right? Don't necessarily because otherwise, you've got those golden handcuffs, right? And that, so not leave, but don't be so afraid if that job goes away. But anyway, what tangible advice can you kind of give to people sort of facing this right now?
Well, again, going back to the, what's happening, we're seeing a shift again to there's more older people, there's less younger people, birth rates have dropped, people are living longer lives. And eventually, I think, the thesis of the longevity economy is a lot of things are going to shift because of those unstoppable demographic things. But the interim people who are caught in the transition, oh, guess what? It's Generation X. Always happens to us.
Throw it first, right?
Yeah.
First. Yeah. And
so, so if we have to work longer, employers are going to realize that unless AI, replaces us all, they're going to need to retain older workers because there's not enough young people coming in to the job market. But right now, they don't know that. They haven't gotten the memo So they're still effectively ageist. You get to your 50s, you're expensive, we're worth it. Everything says that we're, our collective wisdom and experience and all of that is well worth the salaries that we should be earning at this stage. And yet employers have this bias towards youth and technology. And the plain fact of the matter is that corporate job, you may well get laid off, especially with what's going on now, possibly headed to recession. I mean, it certainly seems like it. We're the first to go. So I say in a counterintuitive way, having a job is the least secure thing you could have right now, because when you get laid off in your 50s, you're usually long-term unemployed, meaning more than 6 months. So you dip into your 401k, further depleting your retirement savings. But even worse, when you interrupt this last 10 years of income, this is really the runway that you're really supposed to accelerate so that you do have enough ostensibly to retire. So it's just a perfect storm of suck that, to me, someone who's been, who hasn't had a job in 25 years, it's always challenging, but I can make my own good luck, as a business person, as opposed to white knuckling it, waiting to see if I get laid off in the next round.
So what should we do? Like, I'm a hybrid, right? I've had corporate jobs, but I've also been an entrepreneur in my life. I have some friends who are in a similar situation who are kind of clinging on to their jobs and are worried that if they lose those jobs, they have absolutely nothing to fall back on.
Right.
What should I tell those people? I mean, I can tell you what I tell them, but I'm very curious what you tell.
Well, the good thing about Gen X and our resiliency and autonomy is that we're the most entrepreneurial generation. If anyone can handle it, we can handle it. So that's the rah-rah part.
Right.
But, starting your own thing doesn't have to be some grand capital-intensive business. In fact, I would recommend against that. This is not a time to be risking capital or even raising capital. You can be a freelancer. You can be a consultant. You have all this experience. And everyone's been predicting that we're moving more to this free agent kind of economy, right? Yeah. Like, what's called the gig economy now is probably not attractive to a lot of people. We're not trying to drive Ubers. But we do have the capacity and the technology, especially now with AI. AI may replace you at the corporate job, but it augments you when you're the owner of the company. And you can use it to amplify yourself, which is a skill that everyone's going to have to learn. So it's not a great situation or context, but taking control of things. And I never recommend, quit your job, but I do recommend start putting something in place. You get a plan, start something on the side, right? Just put yourself in a better defensible position, because it's not great to sit there sweating it out. And they say the stock market may be flat for the next 10 years. How are we supposed to even catch up on retirement savings, like the financial planners are always starting to say? So there's a lot of benefits, and I go through it all, but I say it all the time. I'm not selling you a dream. I mean, this is a rational, logical choice, and we're the generation of people that's best equipped to capitalize on it. So think about it, because that's my main message.
It's all, and it's a great message, and it's one that I not only subscribe to, but actually kind of live, maybe unknowingly, sort of, not that I had a plan to live it this way, it just sort of, this is the way it's played out.
Right. Yeah.
I lost my job, my full-time job, about a year ago, but maybe somehow I had the intuition that this might be coming, because I, like everybody, was looking over my shoulder being like, I'm not sure this job is going to last. And again, I wasn't fired. I was laid off. I think so many of us are laid off, right? They just eliminate the position.
Right.
But I started a podcasting company on the side as a sort of side hustle, because I loved podcasting, because it sort of combined a lot of my
skill set in terms of, being a journalist, but also, knowing how to ask questions. Although this might prove that that's not really true at all. But being interested in storytelling, et cetera, a lot of things. And I'm a DJ, right? So I loved all the kind of production part of putting podcasts together. So combine that, all the things that I'm interested in into one thing is podcasting. Now, I started this podcasting company. So when I lost my job, I can't say that I was able to kind of recover fully. I still had lost my insurance. I lost a lot of stuff, but I had this thing to fall back on, which was probably prevented me from, being really, really super panicked when that happened. And so I encourage people to start, thinking about that kind of stuff. What's some other thing I can do on the side that I really, that I would enjoy doing? And that, if this big corporate job should go away, that I can fall back on. Now, again, I've had to, the other thing that you're saying that I think is really important is that it doesn't have to be this huge idea. I think maybe in Gen X, the way we've been wired is like, I'm going to go from the job. The next thing I'm going to find is going to be a comparable income, comparable title, comparable, and that might probably is not going to happen, right? At this stage in our career. I mean, sometimes there's always exceptions. Somebody might be able to just jump to the next corporate job with the same title. Right. But the chances are you're probably going to, if you even find another full-time job, it's probably going to be like half the salary you were making, right? And it's maybe a lesser title, et cetera. So it's important, I feel like, to have lots of different revenues, to try to envision having lots of different revenue streams, even if they're kind of smaller in scale. Yeah. That's kind of the new mindset I think that we need to adopt. And it sounds really tiring and hard, I think, if you're not in the middle of it. But I'm in the middle of it right now. And I'm not saying it's like a walk in the park, but it's manageable and kind of nice in some ways because I'm not beholden to one annoying boss. I don't have that constant pressure of feeling like I'm going to get fired and my whole life is going to fall apart. So I'm still a work in progress. I haven't totally figured it out, but I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about. And tell me if I'm wrong here.
No, I've got this concept called the personal enterprise where effectively you gave a great example. You had expertise, the Gen X DJ, when young, naturally gravitates to podcasting, right? So, and then from there, you're looking at generating different income streams, right? So that's how I get people to think. Maybe you start off as a consultant or a freelancer, but you're really in the business of expertise. And the business of expertise has all sorts of expressions and income streams as long as you are willing to think that way and kind of start intentionally realizing that, okay, I'm going to do client services because that's the easiest way to make, as much money per client as possible. But I'm going to go from there and I'm going to develop these other business things and become more of an entrepreneurial venture as opposed to just sticking with client services and kind of going through that feast and famine aspect of, I got a bunch of clients. I'm so busy. Oh, I got nothing. Right. I got to do marketing. Yeah.
And the idea, though, the expertise thing, I think is very important because I think it's important that at some point you understand what your expertise is. And it took me a while to even realize that I had an expertise, right? Because you're doing something for so long, you don't realize, oh, maybe somebody will actually pay me to learn about what I've learned over the years. Now, my background is magazine publishing, right? And magazine journalism. So I was an editor and a writer for many years. Now, magazines, you might have heard of them. They pay, but I still had that skill set. I still was able to tell stories, edit stories, understand what makes a good story. I knew the structure. I didn't realize that there was like a structure of stories that I had learned almost by osmosis, having done it so many years. And I put it into a more practical sort of lesson plan that I would be able to teach people. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I mean, again, that's another income stream is that I've been teaching people how to write basically. And it turns out there's a lot of people that don't know the basic things that I thought were so basic, but aren't because you don't know them unless you've actually, worked at a job where you had to know how to do them. I feel like, do you ever recommend that people kind of sit down and kind of reflect on their, what are my skills that I can offer? I mean, is that a good sort of practice?
Well, if you currently have a job and that you're being paid for, you have expertise, you have commercial expertise right there. But sometimes people think, well, freelancer is design or code or writer. but, anyone can be an independent contractor, right? So you're really replacing having one client with multiple clients. And that's the first step. But I love what you said about teaching, because as we get older, the joke is that the old processor slows down and we're not as sharp as we once were. And that technically true. Fluid intelligence is what we were good at when we were young. It's pure processing speed. But now we have what's called crystallized intelligence, which is accumulated wisdom, experience, and it's almost an intuitive understanding of the right answer. But intuition just means you have the answer inside of you. You don't have to consciously think about it. You just pull it up, right? Yeah. So that crystallized intelligence is the reason why older college professors, I'm talking 70s and 80-year-old people, often guys, but not always, get the highest ratings from students, because they're the best teachers. Even if the young TA hotshot has the super processor, he or she doesn't have the accumulated experience. You haven't seen it all, right? Because you haven't been around that long. So, from a marketing standpoint, but also from a business standpoint, I encourage people to take on a mentor mindset where you attract people to you by helping them, and then they pay you money so you can help them more. And that's really what to lean into, that you have got this experience. And again, in a world where AI seems like it's taking over, that human element is the one thing that can't be replaced. And you've got it in abundance compared to younger people. Now, I'm certainly not wishing ill on younger people. I'm just saying we are far from washed up. In fact, we are in the prime of our value. It's just, you got to deal with people who see that. And sometimes employers, as I mentioned, aren't seeing it. That's a mistake, but it doesn't mean they're not going to make that mistake.
Yeah. I mean, look, ageism is real. Like we know it. One of the first things I did after I lost my job was, kept looking for jobs on LinkedIn, and like I'd be lucky to even get a response. And this was like months and months and months. At a certain point, I had to wonder whether my age had something to do with it. I interviewed somebody yesterday who is a financial advisor, and he said something that was interesting to me. I mean, aside from ageism, which is just real, there's also, it's more expensive, right, to hire people our age for companies, because you have to take on your insurance. Right. That's something that we have to just be aware. That's a reality, unfair as it is, that we have to be aware of. Has that been your understanding as well?
Yes. I mean, ageism is the last great prejudice. I mean, jokes, comments that you would never say against, based on other demographic characteristics like race or gender or what have you, but people just throw out an old joke without a problem. And older people are often the worst about it, right? But people who have a positive viewpoint towards aging actually live 7 years longer than people who don't, because it's not funny when it comes down to it. Now, so we can control our own attitudes about how we feel as we get older. But to your point, yes, we are more expensive in the workforce, but we're worth it, especially with the new technology tools, because the missing piece is the human experience aspect, not just someone to babysit the robot,
Yes.
So, But again, that corporate America, I mean, I call myself unemployable for good reason. I do not operate well working for someone else. So I may be on the extreme end of that. But most people don't like their jobs, and they're not treated as if they're valued. And corporations will constantly shoot themselves in the foot by laying off people to save money with a short-term quarterly view, instead of thinking, what's the long-term good here? So I see a situation where, again, as we move into an older society, and this is a worldwide thing, not just in the United States, we are going to see a shift where older workers are valued out of necessity, But again, what do you do in the next 10 years? That's us again. And this is why I've always started businesses that were somehow tied to some sort of movement away from the status quo, right? And that's how you can gain traction. And this is the biggest problem that requires moving away from the status quo of my career. And it's a big problem for a lot of people. So I don't think I can save everyone, but I sure as heck hope I can help a few people out.
Are you asking people to sort of be more entrepreneurial in the way they think? Because I think a lot of people, maybe in their 50s, haven't ever really been entrepreneurs. That just hasn't been their path, right? They've always worked for somebody. And so suddenly asking somebody at the age of 55 to be an entrepreneur might sound a bit daunting. How do that? And that would have probably sounded daunting to me 15 years ago. But how do we make that less daunting to somebody who hasn't had that experience?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm not saying that when you have a huge problem, it's not all unicorns and rainbows, right? But what I usually try to do is dispense with the misconceptions about people our age. We've already talked about how Generation X is, the most entrepreneurial. We started some of the most, powerful companies in the world, all the way down to small businesses that I find to be the lifeblood of things. But the most interesting thing is, the myth that an entrepreneur is a 20-something in a hoodie, right? When it's actually a 45 to 65-year-old person when it comes to who succeeds, right? So the kids may start companies, but they don't succeed all that often because they don't have the network, the experience, in some cases, the capital, but mainly it's the expertise and the experience that leads to better judgment and better decisions and more successful companies. So, the average tech startup founder is 45, which blows a lot of people's minds. And the average small business person is in their 50s or early 60s. So this is the time to do it. Just because you never did it before doesn't necessarily mean you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I think media gives us this image of, like you're saying, all these like entrepreneurs in their 20s, in Silicon Valley, like, meeting with VCs and, launching these companies. That's one subset, but that's really interesting to know that most entrepreneurs are much older. If you don't necessarily have an entrepreneurial mindset going in, what advice might you give to somebody, making that transition? Again, I think one of the most important things you're saying is don't necessarily think big right away, right? Because that could just freeze you in your tracks. You're like, I'm going to build the next Tesla or whatever. Whatever it is that you're deciding, maybe start consulting, right? Or teaching, or is that kind of the way to do it? Throw a lot of things at the wall and kind of see what gets you excited?
I think, people should start whatever kind of business they want. You want to go big, go big. You want to start a coffee shop? I mean, if you really want to start a coffee shop, do it. It's a terrible business, really, when you think about it. You'll work so hard for so little. But, people have these ideas that this is what we're talking about. But again, let's go back to the fact that you have a job and a company pays you to do that job. Well, theoretically, your first client could be your employer if you're in that position, and then you slowly, methodically add additional clients. And that doesn't require this radical entrepreneurial mindset. You're doing what you do, what you already do well. What you're really having to learn is marketing, right? And that, when it comes down to it, is what entrepreneurship is. It's bringing something to market. And so that is the big challenge for people. So most people start off in client services. No matter what they're doing today, they probably started off with clients as a freelancer or some variation of that. It's a great place to start. It just doesn't mean you have to stay there. And that's kind of what I encourage people, because again, client services, you know what you know how to do this. You can replace your salary within a reasonable amount of time. But I just encourage people to go, okay, this is just one income stream.
Yeah.
And if you think about this in a broader way, then you can start off strategically so that you're adding to those income streams as you go along.
So maybe it'll be helpful to delineate what client services means. Tell us exactly like what you mean by that.
Well, that's when people pay you to do something for them, right?
Okay.
So consulting done for them, coaching is done with them, and let's say courses are do it yourself, right?
Yeah.
So those are three forms of the business of expertise. One's a product, the middle one's productized, and the other one, you're doing the hands-on work. You get paid the most to do the work for them, but there's a broader market of people out there who either can't afford to pay you to do it for them, or they don't want to, right? So
Yep.
that's the first level of thinking, okay, I have expertise. I can create intellectual property. Now, these are the things that make people's heads swim because they hear these terms and they're
Right.
like, that's not something I can do. Of course you can. I mean, if you can record a video like this, you're creating IP.
This is IP. Exactly. The challenge is how do you monetize this ultimately, right?
Right.
And specifically, but how do you all this IP that you're creating? Is there a way to monetize it? Take me beyond client services. What are some things that people could think of? I mean, again, there's a million ways you could go, but like in your experience, talking to people in our situation, where have been some successful lanes that they've jumped in?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the starting point for anything is attracting an audience, and everyone who has a Substack, or even people who are just on Substack and subscribing to various people, they understand this concept. Back, in 2006, when I started, I coined the term audience first as a business model, that you attract the audience and then you listen to them and they tell you what to create for them, as opposed to the product-led mindset or the product market fit mindset where I create this thing, now I got to find some people to buy it. And 90% of those businesses fail. Why? Because you created something no one wanted because you weren't listening. You just wanted to make that thing you thought was cool. Right?
Yeah.
So the wonderful thing about a platform and an ecosystem like Substack is it's essentially ingrained the idea that this is what you do. You attract an audience and then you can make money from it. With Substack, that's with the paid subscriptions. But of course, there are all sorts of things and offers you can make in addition to Substack's paid thing.
Like what? I mean, so Substack is interesting because we're all here on Substack. So ostensibly, many people listening, watching, are wondering if there's a way to make money off of this platform. Again, subscriptions is wonderful. Have you seen other ways to monetize using Substack as a platform?
Yeah, well, you can look at all the Substack about Substack people and see what they do. But let's use you as an example. Let's say that you had your Substack was dedicated to podcasting, running your own audio stuff, maybe Descript. Like you focus on teaching them how to use that software, and that's your paid portion. But you're also offering your own services to actually do it for them at the same time. So you've got the equivalent, Substack paid is really just a membership site, right? Which is kind of a form of, it's not the same as a course, but it's similar. So it's paid content that's instructive. So those would be two models for you right there. And then in the middle, you could do like a live cohort coaching program where you don't do it for them and it's not just passive do-it-yourself learning. It's more like you walk them through it. You're there giving them instruction. You're there answering questions. The group interacts with each other and supports each other, that kind of thing. So that's the middle ground. I mean, so those are just three very common ways to think about that. And people are doing that on Substack every day.
Yeah. How long have you been on Substack?
So that's a great question because Further just moved over in February. And again, it's been around for quite a while in different forms. But I got acquainted with Substack in 2023 because I was, my software company basically sold WordPress stuff, right? So we were very much an advocate for having your own website. And I still am. I have a hybrid, Further has its own site and it has Substack and it's integrated together. But I wanted to do this project about the longevity economy, basically educating other marketers about the fact that the 50 plus market is the most lucrative market in the world and controls like 83% of all household wealth. And when people hear that, they're like, I had no idea, right? Because what do marketers do to us? They ignore us, right? And we're the ones with all the money. They're all chasing Gen Z.
They don't spend it. My kid is Gen Z. He doesn't have any money.
The only money my kids have is mine.
The right people are listening to this. Okay, anyway, move on.
Yeah.
So
So I wanted to do this project. I knew it was going to be temporary. Didn't want to build a website. And I'm like, man, I'm just going to do this on Substack. And I looked at it. I'm like, okay, can I take my content with me? Yes. Can I take my email list with me? Yes. Okay, this passes the initial test of whether or not Substack is going to screw me, basically. So then I proceeded, and that's when I learned that Substack's pretty awesome, actually, because it's an email-first environment. When you think about Substack, it's really blogging software with membership capabilities, email deliverability, and a social media component and notes. But when you put all that together, it allows you to generate traffic, to advertise your email list. People opt in. Mm-hmm. And, that's really the essence of digital marketing that works.
You've kind of come full circle, right? This is where you started.
Yeah, right. I mean, it used to be much easier with social media and search to drive traffic, get people on your list and all that. But all the algorithms are working against us, except for in this little oasis called Substack, where they have effectively trained people to sign up for email newsletters. I mean, that's the whole point. So if you're here and you're part of it, then that's what you do. And that was very fascinating. When I launched the paid portion for that previous project, I got to like 250 paid people. And Substack starts going, oh, you're making us money. We're going to promote you with the algorithm even more. And I was like, I don't think people understand this. Yes, you have to pay 10%, but that's like paying an agent to go get you business to make you more money. Because once Substack sees that you're generating money for them, that's their business model, they want you to make more money. That's a very fascinating concept when you think about it. So that's what convinced me to move further over. I'd been planning on doing it for about a year, and I finally got around to it at the beginning of this year.
I'm glad you're here. I think we all are. And I'm sort of talking to a similar audience. You are Gen X. And it seems like there are a lot of Gen Xers here, as opposed to like maybe a TikToker. I haven't seen the demographics of Substack, but like this might be a place where like-minded people are hanging out right now.
It's hard to know because we talk about Gen X, so the algorithm shows us more Gen X stuff. Who knows? Yeah. But I get the same feeling. There's definitely a lot of people here, which is great.
All right. I want to move on to we've talked a lot about career stuff. I want to talk a little bit about lifestyle, travel, living, where I think a lot of people are also faced with this issue of where am I going to live now? Like, especially if you have kids and then you become an empty nester, you sometimes are faced with this question, am I going to stay in the same house, in the same place? Do I want to, is this next chapter, or do I want to maybe live somewhere else? Do I want to explore, and maybe that'll bring even different career opportunities. And this is very much, I'm speaking your language here because you talked a little bit about you and your wife, kind of the situation you're in. You write a lot about it, your decision to actually uproot and move.
Yeah. So, back in 2018, returning to them, we were planning to go on that trip, whether the company sold or not. In fact, when we made the plan, we didn't even have a deal working. But I'm location independent. I can work from anywhere. So we were just going to do it. Then the transaction happened. I'm like, wow, we're really going now. And I wasn't supposed to work at all, but I did, which was an indication that I probably wasn't in any danger of retiring. But, just moving around, we went from France to Tokyo to Australia to New Zealand to Fiji.
How long did you stay in these places?
Overall, it was 7 months.
Okay.
Well, no. Yeah. So we never stayed anywhere more than 3 months. Tokyo was a shorter trip. And we were supposed to be gone a year, but I had 2 teenagers who were like, I want to go home. And I'm
Yeah.
like, now they say that was the greatest thing you ever did for us. I'm
Right.
like, yeah, well, you didn't know that at the time. Yeah, so we did that. And so you sell the company, you go back to Boulder, you buy the bigger house, you buy a fancier car. No, we were just like, we sold the cars and we were planning, to sell the house as soon as the kids were on their own. We actually waited an additional 2 years from the time my son left, graduated from high school, because he ended up going to CU Boulder. And yeah, I wouldn't trade the last 2 years for anything, getting to spend with him. But now I feel a little bit more comfortable as he enters his junior year, and everything's going to be fine. My daughter's older than that. She's working. So, yeah, the time is now. And as we mentioned before we went live, this has been the plan all along, and it was totally from a positive space. I mean, I want to keep working like you as I get, about 10 years down the road. I don't want to be busting my ass, but I still want to write. I still want, so I want to work now to set up my business go forward that fulfills a sense of purpose, pays the bills, all that kind of good stuff. But that I can keep doing for as long as I want to. So the idea is not to always work so terribly hard. It's just don't plan on retiring and do it in a way that is under your control.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the plan. We're going to travel the world. I'm still going to run my business. I'm still going to work. It's going to be an ideal situation. To me, this is, the ideal lifestyle. Then by the time we're ready to go, the election happened. Right. And now the talk of leaving the country is rampant. I mean, 42%, according to a Harris poll, are considering or actively planning to leave the United States. That's outrageous. Now, most of those people won't do it. But the fact that the sentiment is very disturbing, but I don't blame people. So now, even though our motivation is still the same, the world has changed. Now you have to figure out, okay, where is it safe to go? We love Europe. Do we want to be over there with what's going on with Putin? I don't know. I mean, it's very dicey in that regard. Now, that's not going to deter us, but the calculation has changed. And, I'd be lying if I said that it's not part of the calculation at this point to go somewhere else.
Where have been some places you've traveled so much that seem American friendly? I'm assuming a lot of people watching this are Americans, but I'm sure we have some European people joining us too. I hope we do. Right. But where are some places that you feel like would be American friendly? Would be, the cost of living isn't as high. You feel like, it's almost America, feels like America and the America that we grew up in, when things were better. No. I'm not. I mean, I know that I grew up in the 80s, and I know that we had our fair share of problems then too. But are there people, like, I hear people talking about Portugal all the time, and right. North Carolina? Like, there's certain places that come up a lot in conversation. What have you're really thinking about leaving the country, right? Specifically, or are you looking at different places within America as well?
Oh no, we're definitely. I've seen all of the United States. I'm good. Yeah. Right. Yes, but of course, with kids and aging parents here as well, it's not like we're cutting the ties.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting. So people flocked to Portugal for a long time because they had this golden visa program where you could buy real estate, gain, residency in Portugal, which means you are now a resident of the EU. You can roam Europe freely. You can work, right? I know. But yeah. That was too popular, and they ended the real estate option. They made some other changes, so it's not quite the next thing. Now you're hearing people go, Uruguay is the new Portugal, right? And Uruguay really is attractive. It's very far down there, and most people don't even think about it, don't even know where it is on a map, probably. But let's be a little more practical. I mean, the places people go generally are different from the places that people think they want to go, if that makes sense. Now, to your point, people say, I want to go to Canada, I want to go to the UK, I want to go to Australia, right? Because they don't want to learn another language. That is very American.
Yep.
And I can totally understand that. I spent 3 months in Australia. I loved it, but I was a little disappointed at how Americanized it actually is. It is America without guns and a cooler accent. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
So, but those countries don't want us necessarily. It's not that right? They don't need immigration and they don't need our money necessarily, right? Canada's tough, right? And Trump's always bullying them all the time. So that may not turn out well. But the places a lot of expats go are countries that actually want you there because they want your American dollars. They want you to contribute to the economy. And those places are generally Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama. Those are like 3 favorites among American and Canadian expats that moved down.
Interesting.
Because they're very easy with residency, especially if you're retired, your Social Security check basically gets you in the country. You only have to prove passive income of $1,000 a month.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And
So,
Diolande, of course, I completely butchered that because I don't speak Spanish, which is in Mexico, and there's so many. It's gorgeous city in Mexico. So many expats there. And it was cool. Like I went into a record store that was owned by some guy from Texas, and he was kind of living his dream of having it was a vinyl record store, in Mexico. And I was like, wow, this is cool. Like this is like a whole different way of living that I had never even thought about. So that's interesting. And you don't feel like, I think it's nice to be able to speak the language, but you don't necessarily have to speak Spanish if you're in Panama and Mexico.
You should,
or Europe.
You should endeavor to learn, but you can get by at the beginning because there are a lot of English. There are a lot of expats. You could get in within the expat community, and they're all speaking English. But to really thrive, you should learn as much Spanish as you can, and that's something I want to do. I'm just mad at myself. I haven't gotten farther along. Growing up in Texas, I should have learned Spanish a long time ago, but I tried. I just didn't quite stick with it.
Yeah. All right. I want to start opening it up to our listeners, and why do I keep saying listeners? Because I'm a podcaster. Our viewers here. A lot, and I'm sure they have a lot of questions. I do have one last question, and you can't ever have a conversation anymore without talking about AI. So sorry, I'm going to talk about AI, but AI and Gen X. You've always been an early adopter. You obviously are very up on sort of tech stuff. Is AI something that we sort of don't learn at our own peril, or do you think this is something that we just let the youngins deal with and let's not worry about it? Because I think we always see it as an existential threat, and it is in many ways. But I wonder what our relationship to AI should be. I know what it is for me, but I'm curious what your opinion is.
Yeah, in my little bubble of solopreneurs and whatnot, AI is a big deal. It's indispensable. It's something that can augment and amplify you when you own the business. It's not going to replace you. If it does replace you and you're still cashing checks, I suppose that's not the worst thing in the world, but I don't see that as happening. It needs the interplay with the human aspect, and the human aspect is what is going to resonate with your customers and clients, not the AI, right? So the worst thing you can do is try to replace yourself with AI, but to amplify what you can do as one person is amazing. So I talk about the AI issue because I do think it may be the threat beyond the economy in the next 5 years to corporate employees of a certain age. Again, my advice to any employer would be to retain your older workers and augment them with AI. But the real issue about that in a corporate setting is AI can be used to control you and monitor you. Things you're not going to do to yourself, So I am, of course, entirely biased in favor of working for yourself and using AI to do more.
Writing partner in my case, or as an intern, as a really smart intern that I have.
Yeah. Research assistant. I'm a writer. I don't want it to write for me, but it helps me sift through massive amounts of information, or it gives me a different perspective on my own writing, right? When you start with your own IP, there's that word again, your own point of view that's expressed in your own content, then AI can do all sorts of cool stuff. Break it up into chunks for social media posts, slice and dice, find hidden angles and hooks that you may not even recognize. So yeah, it's a very smart, very fast assistant.
Yeah. I've started teaching courses on how to work with AI because I find that people, especially people our age, are a little bit scared of it. Some people, and probably a lot of people watching this are not because they're probably a little more tech savvy, but people are scared or just feel like this is, like, oh, I don't get it. I go on there and it's like, it's always wrong. And it's always,
yeah.
Enough. Yes, it's wrong a lot, and you have to really work with it and understand it.
Well, you don't want it to just search the whole internet for you.
Yeah.
You want it to analyze, discrete pieces of information that you give it, right? So again, writers are threatened by AI, but paradoxically, writers are the people who can get the most out of AI if they'll change their mindset about how, what their role is and all of that good stuff. We could have a whole conversation about this alone.
If you subscribe to my Substack and maybe Brian's, I talk about the classes that I teach on AI because I have found it I can't even imagine like life pre-AI. Like now that it's become such a part of my process, not writing my Substack posts as much, although it will tweak and it will like give it's a good thing to bounce ideas off of, I find. So anyway, I have so many uses for it that are very positive. And all right, this is probably the time we should open it up to some questions.
So do we have 90 people in here?
Yeah, we have 90 people watching.
That's pretty cool.
It's really freaking cool. Now, this is the first time Brian and I have ever done a Substack Live, so this is really awesome. I encourage anybody watching. Thank you, by the way. Thank you for watching. This is freaking awesome.
Hey, Denise Wakeman is here. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I I know. Hi, Dana Dubois. Hey, Warren Cohen. Hey, Gail O'Connor. Hey, Mom. My mom's watching from New York. Hi, Mom. But I think this would be a time maybe to ask either of us some questions. So again, this is a little new, so I'm going to see how this works. But hi, Gail. I'm going to scroll, and if you have any questions, please. I don't know. You can see these too, right, Brian, on the bottom of your screen.
I can, yeah.
And if nobody has questions, then I can keep going because I have a million questions. Mainly, what is your favorite movie growing up? What is your favorite 80s movie?
Oh man, you're going with the big guns now.
Exactly. I didn't prep you for this.
No, but I lose my Gen X card if I don't have an answer for this. I'm going to have to go with The Breakfast Club is probably the most meaningful of the John Hughes movies. Yeah, but I'm also a closet fan of Weird Science. That movie is underrated.
It is true. That is the one that's underrated. No, I'm gonna do an article about this soon about sort of the most iconic 80s movies or just really Gen X movies. And the thing about Gen X that's kind of weird is that we span from 65 to 80, or depending, some people say from 63 to I know that. And so what might have been a seminal movie for somebody who's 56, 57 years old is very different than the people who are born in the later part of Gen X. So like Reality Bites might be their movie, or Clueless.
Yeah.
And there's a huge divide, even though we're all part of the same.
See, I go with the good, earnest Breakfast Club, and then I also go with Heathers, which was the darkest satire. I loved it so much.
I want to watch it again. I'm going to watch it with my daughter, who's 15. I think she'll like it. She doesn't always like my movies.
She's probably going to go, how the hell did they make this movie? Because everything about it is taboo in today's...
Completely inappropriate, I guess. All right. Anybody have any questions? Anybody? Because this is a really wonderful time. So yeah, I encourage you. And by the way, I have all these people joining me from my ex magazine. Hello, Abby and Gail, used to work with me at Fitness Magazine. Oh God, those were the days when we used to work. I'm like a poster child for Gen X, having to figure out the next new thing, because here I was somebody who grew up, thinking of magazines. Like, I'm going to be in the magazine business, right? There's some stable business. And it was, if you were growing up in the 80s and the 90s, the magazines were where it was at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting people were doing stuff.
And remember how big certain magazines were during the .com days, like Fast Company and all of that. Like, it was so ironic that these paper magazines were all the rage about the digital economy. But yeah, the internet kind of put a dent in the magazine business.
I got a good question here. Brian, and this is from my friend Gail, what is something you don't miss about the 80s? What is something you don't miss about being in your 20s?
Oh man, you're crazy in your 20s, right? You're completely emotionally unstable.
I knew you, Gail.
You're poor. Let's see, I was poor. A hopeless romantic who was always like, breaking up with a girlfriend. It was just, to me, my 20s, there's this great quote about something about men in their 20s and the dark, brooding nature of it and all that. And I think, Gen X guys in particular were just like Ethan Hawke from Reality Bites.
Yeah.
He had to be that brooding intellectual slacker.
I was always really being a bad boy. I tried really hard. I was terrible at it. But all that stuff is so ridiculous now. You know what I don't miss? I don't miss worrying so much about what other people think about me. And I think
absolutely.
You're so obsessed with, like, you think it's so important, what people think about you. And now I'm just like, why did I spend so much time worrying about that?
That's really the benefit of turning 50, right? You just, at that point, if you're still caring what people think about you, doing it wrong.
Right. Somebody asked, this is a great question, what about Greece as a place to get away, to live, or she says even as part of, away for part of the year during the winter time. That's more of a vacation thing. But what about to live in Greece?
Yeah, Greece has one of the last remaining golden visa programs. Depending on where you buy real estate, it's either 250,000 euro, or if it's in one of the popular spots, it's 500,000 euros. So that's getting up there. But that's what Portugal's was. So you can still do that. Now, I think what gives people pause about Greece is they've had really dramatic financial problems. They were very irresponsible at the government level. Hopefully they're past that now. But like, have you ever been to one of the Greek islands like Mykonos? It's stunning.
Ordinarily, no, I can't imagine get anything.
But yeah, that you may not be able to work from there. Actually, it's too much.
Food is
but that's an option, And again, you get access to the EU if you become a resident of Greece.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Greece, I like that. How do you balance working in what you knew versus what is now? Interesting. I like that phrasing. Only a Substack group could come up with cool phrasing like that. What is with what is now? What you knew with what is now? Sorry. How do you?
Yeah. Well, I always tell people, because every technological change or gadget or whatever, everyone's like, everything's different. I'm like, no, it's not. My friend David Matten is a futurist and a trend guy, and he writes a Substack called New World, Same Humans. Human nature doesn't change. The context is constantly changing, and technology is the fundamental context that we operate in now. So as a content marketing guy, a copywriter, I always say, look, the fundamentals don't change when it comes to persuading people, whether it be to buy something or to adopt your ideas or what have you, but the context shifts. So you have to take that into account, but never make the mistake of thinking, oh, people behave completely differently. They adapt to the context, but they're still human beings and they still have human nature and respond to the same things from a level of influence and persuasion, all that good stuff. So I always tell people, even if you don't intend to write, studying copywriting is one of the most valuable things you can do because it effectively teaches you the fundamentals of what humans respond to.
Yeah, if people want to follow you,
and then you can adapt to any context with that. So that's what my whole career is.
Yeah,
it's just rapidly
Usually
accelerating
I say
technology.
That's
Which is going to keep going and keep increasing.
and
you can actually,
and
there's
and
Substack
trying to figure out
forums
how
on there.
humans are going to
You'll
behave
get
in that
to the
context.
Substack.
Wow. We've got
the actual domain
going on right
for the Substack is news.further.net.
So.
And then my handle on notes or whatever is, I think it's that Brian Clark. Yeah. Thank you so much for showing up.
Thank you for listening to Right About Now, hosted by my dad, Jonathan Small. If you like what you heard, there are a few ways you can help support the show. First, please leave a rating and review wherever you may listen to this podcast. This really helps others find Right About Now. You can also head over to patreon.com/rightaboutnowpodcast to make a donation. Finally, subscribe to the Right About Now newsletter called Small Talk on Substack.com. This is Ella, encouraging you all to do the right thing.